Hello and welcome in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the program. Full disclosure, this might not be a great video because I am tired. I only got 4.5 hours of sleep last night because I stayed up to watch Game 6 of the Minnesota Wild playoff series against the Vegas Golden Knights, and we won. We are going to Game 7. We have forced a series to go the distance. We have come back from a 3-1 deficit. Fantastic third period last night. First two periods, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't spectacular, but it was good. That's what this team needs against a Vegas Golden Knights team that is as skilled as they are. So Cam Talbot remains amazing. Bukestad gets a goal. Fiala gets a goal. Yeah, fantastic. Can't wait for Game 7 tomorrow night. That is our little aside for the Minnesota Wild as we keep up with their playoff series. Today, we are, of course, talking about the Minnesota Vikings, and this is a topic that is normally hotly debated at the beginning of the regular season, or at least right before it. But here we are in May, and I scroll through Twitter this afternoon, and I see a tweet by a website called betonline.ag, and I'm thinking, I'm not really a gambling person, don't really do many prop bets, but the graphic catches my eye, and I thought, this is something that we should discuss. So, what have they unleashed onto the world? I'll put the graphic up on the screen here for you, and it is the odds to be the first head coach fired of the 2021 season. And here you see the top 5 candidates, and holding down the number 5 spot at plus 1100 is none other than Mike Zimmer. So that is an interesting take coming from the gambling world. As I've said already, I'm not really somebody who gambles, for any reason, especially when it comes to sports. But Vegas odds are something that I do pay attention to when I do like regular fantasy football, because it seems like Vegas is always up to something. They always know what's going on. So sort of base a lot of things fantasy football related about Vegas odds, like who's favorite to do what, when, and where in the NFL regular season, so I can sort of maximize lineups. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but more often than not, you can glean some things from what the odds makers are telling you. So with that in mind, let's go over these one by one, and then we'll cap this off with Mike Zimmer at the end, and I will give you my take and reaction to him being the 5th best candidate to be fired first, apparently, for the 2021 season. So betonline.ag, again, I'm not a gambling person. I don't advocate using gambling services. Gambling can be an addiction, blah, 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 blah. I'm not the person to come to talk about that. Let's just put that out in the open. So they have accrued that they have made this list here, and Mike McCarthy is the number 1 overall favorite with the Dallas Cowboys. Short, sweet, and to the point. I would be kind of surprised. Jerry Jones marches to the beat of his own drum. He does a lot of wild things. He takes control when he probably shouldn't. But last year just felt like a huge, just endless series of unfortunate events for the Dallas Cowboys, right? So I don't think you can really put him in a bad situation right off the bat for 2021, because not only was he dealing with the pandemic, as was everyone else, it just seemed like the team just kept dropping like flies. And he had to make a change with the defensive coordinator. I guess I don't like what they did in the draft, taking so many linebackers like Jabril Cox, Micah Parsons, and there was a third one whose name escapes me right now. But I think the Cowboys are good enough and the division is bad enough where Mike McCarthy should be able to do enough to keep his job for one more year. Vic Fangio is in an interesting situation with the Denver Broncos. I don't know how much more patience John Elway has with this current regime that he's installed. But again, it feels like Vic Fangio finds himself in a place where he's just unlucky all the time with injuries, decimating his defense. The offense can't, really produce when it is, rummaging through the bottom of the barrel to find a quarterback just to make a start last season. And then I think the one game they ended up starting a practice squad wide receiver who hasn't played quarterback since college? I don't remember the exact details of that, but that's not a situation you want to be in. So I think Vic Fangio gets a little bit of a pass. I think he should get a few more, shots at it or attempts to try to build the defense that he did in Chicago that was very successful and led to a 12-4 season. Speaking of Chicago, next on the list is Matt Nagy, and I think more people would consider him an initial favorite over Mike McCarthy and some of these other guys to be the first head coaching candidate to be fired, because the offense that he's supposed to be known for just hasn't happened. Now, of course, he's been inundated with Mitch Trubisky for a number of years. That monkey is finally off of his back. So this is kind of a proving year for Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace as well, because they went up in the draft, traded up to get Justin Fields. They signed Andy Dalton. That was about their best free agent option available on the market this year. And then they decided, hey, let's go get Justin Fields. They've kind of put themselves in a conundrum because they've talked up Andy Dalton as QB1 so much before and after the draft. They seem to be sticking with their guns on that. But Matt Nagy has to prove himself now that he is free of Mitchell Trubisky. And, Allen Robinson's always unhappy. He wants to leave the team. They were looking to trade Anthony Miller, probably still are. I don't know. The Bears strike me as kind of a mess, but Justin Fields gives them hope. And then I think Justin Fields can be somebody that keeps them around. So is Matt Nagy a candidate to be fired early on? Yes, he is, but I think it would be unlikely given what has transpired this offseason for them. John Gruden doesn't belong on the list. Absolutely not. No, there is no way, unless this team goes 0-10, 0-12 to start the season, it would have to be terrible. It would have to be bad because I think him and Mike Mayock are a package deal, and the Las Vegas Raiders are just crazy. They do crazy things like give guys like John Gruden a 10-year head coaching contract. There is no way that they're going to fire him, pony up all of that dough that he's probably going to be owed under that contract. No, not happening. It's insane to think that John Gruden is a candidate to be the first head coach fired, let alone fired at all. I think if anybody would be the scapegoat in this situation, it would probably be Mike Mayock, because let's face it, his drafts have been pretty shitty since he's taken over. I did not like the Clelin Ferrell pick. I didn't like the Damon Arnett pick. I don't like the Alex Leatherwood pick with Christian Darrisaw still on the board. You have some explaining to do, but no, John Gruden is absolutely not going to be the head coach first, the head coach that will be fired first. If he is, I'm going to replay this clip and just laugh at myself. That brings us to Mike Zimmer, who's holding down the 5th spot on this list at 1,100 odds. Listen, we need to come with grips to reality and, sort of leave our bias at the door and remember that there was a point last season where we were calling for his head and we wanted change. So, yeah, there's a real chance that he could be the first head coach fired if we see a repeat of the beginning of last season. And I am, full disclosure, I was one of the ones that led the charge. Well, of people that saw it anyway. I led the charge, not led the charge, but it was part of the charge, I guess you could say. We had a real split after that Falcons loss. Everybody was like, burn it all down, start over. And then the other half was like, no, we can't. Mike Zimmer's our only hope. But yeah, full disclosure, if you go click through the channel, go to the Vikings 2020 regular season playlist, you will find the Fire Mike Zimmer video that I did after the Falcons loss last year and the 1-5 start. And it was a culmination of things. It wasn't just that first half of the season where I was like, okay, I've had enough. It's just built up over time with, disappointing losses in the playoffs, one and done playoffs. Every other year we missed the playoffs. The end of 2018 where Chicago comes into our stadium and we need to win a game to make the playoffs, and we just roll over to the Bears, who were at the time piloted by Mitchell Trubisky. Frustrating. Everything about the Vikings and the ends of their season have been frustrating. And then instead of the end of the season being frustrated last season, we got all of the frustrating out in the first 7 weeks. So, yes, I think that there is a real world scenario that does exist heading into 2021 where Mike Zimmer could find himself on the chopping block. And I think his seat is hotter than most heading into the regular season, having not yet played a game. Because let's face it, he's been the head coach for 7 years now. I think this will be season number 8, 7 or 8, if I remember correctly. What do we have to show for it? A few playoff wins, a couple of division titles. Who cares? The goal is to get to the Super Bowl. Now, you might be saying, well, we got to the NFC Championship in 2017. Yeah, there was still one playoff win. And we probably shouldn't even have won that game. It took the Minneapolis Miracle just to get past the Saints. And then when we did get to the NFC Championship, we got absolutely throttled against the Philadelphia Eagles. So, and that seems to be a reoccurring theme. Once we get a playoff win against the Saints, the next opponent just kicks our ass. So, I was at my wit's end with Mike Zimmer at the midway point of last season, and then everybody was like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Mike Zimmer's our only hope. What, do you want to go back to the Brad Childress years? No, I don't. I want to move on to something else. But having said all that, this team has expectations this year. I think most people would consider the Vikings draft this year to be good. Christian Darrisaw, Chaz Surratt, Wyatt Davis, Kellen Mond is for the future, things of that nature. I think most people would look at the free agency period for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason and say, okay, it's not great You missed out on a lot of big names, but you've addressed some needs. And this is Mike Zimmer's team. He's the defensive guy. He's the defensive wizard. They spent all of their free agent money on defensive players other than offensive players that were already with the team, just, re-signings. So it feels to me like this is being set up where if Mike Zimmer doesn't prove that he is the defensive guy that he is made out to be, then I think he could be in trouble. I really do. And I think the Wilfs might be willing to eat some of that contract because the Wilf ownership, family wants this team to be competitive. They want them to be in the hunt. I don't think they're prepared at all to tolerate 3-13 or another bad start like we saw last year. He got lucky and bought himself some time, digging himself out of that. As far as the first head coach being fired for the 2021 season, which is the entire prompt of this video, yeah, there's a realistic chance. Kirk Cousins started slow last year. He could start slow this year. How much of that do you put on Mike Zimmer? What version of the defense are we going to get this season? Or are we going to get last year's that was rattled with injuries and didn't live up to expectations? Or are we going to get something like from 2017 with Danielle Hunter coming back and Michael Pierce playing a dominant role? What version of Patrick Peterson do we get? There's so many questions regarding everything. So yeah, realistically, I think we need to be prepared for the worst. Not that I want that to happen, not that I'm advocating for it, but there is a potential that Mike Zimmer finds himself as the first NFL head coach to be fired. There's a real world possibility where I see that happening. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Who do you think could be the first NFL head coach to get fired for the season? Do you think it's anybody on this list? Mike McCarthy, Vic Fangio, Matt Nagy, John Gruden? No. Mike Zimmer. Is there somebody that they left off that you think could be the first one to be on the chopping block? That's going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.